I used to avoid veggies like the plague, thinking they were just rabbit food that had no business on a grown man's plate. Funny how the Lord can humble you through small things, like realizing the foods you once pushed aside can help keep you off insulin needles at 68. I remember one morning, sitting by the window with that cool Texas breeze sneaking in, feeling that familiar heaviness in my legs, worrying if today would be the day I'd finally need those shots. I ain't no doctor, but that day I decided to try adding these simple foods to my breakfast instead of toast, just to see. The smell of peppers and greens in the skillet, the way they brighten up eggs, the soft sizzle reminded me of mornings when the kids were still home. It brought a sense of hope I hadn't felt in a while. My sugar didn't spike like I feared, and I felt steadier standing up, thanking the Lord for these small mercies. We spend so much of our lives thinking it's too late to change, but it's never too late to add a bit of color and life back into your mornings. If you've ever felt that quiet fear when checking your sugar, wondering if it's creeping up, I know how that feels, and you're not alone. These veggies don't cost much, they're not fancy, but they become part of my small morning routine that keeps me moving and keeps me grateful. And I reckon, if something simple can bring a bit of peace to your mornings, it's worth a try, isn't it? Some folks think you need expensive powders or those miracle pills from TV to keep your sugar in check, but I'm here to tell you about real food you can pick up at your local store without emptying your wallet. These are the same foods your grandma probably used, and they don't taste like cardboard either. I promise you that. I like to thank the good Lord when I slice them up, hearing that crisp snap as they hit the cutting board, knowing I'm doing something small to care for this body He gave me. If you've been waking up with that dry mouth, worried about your numbers, these veggies might give you a softer start to your day. They're not magic, but they're a small step you can take, and sometimes that's all we need to feel a bit stronger. Have you ever felt like you just want to keep up with your grandkids a little longer without feeling so worn out? I think about that often, and these small choices add up over time, like planting seeds for tomorrow. You don't have to overhaul your whole life, just a bit here and there, and you might find your mornings feeling steadier, your spirit a bit lighter. And the best part is, you can do it in your own kitchen, one small change at a time, with the Lord walking with you through it all. If you like more simple, honest tips like this to help you feel steadier after 60, tap that like button and subscribe so you won't miss the next story we share here. Number 7, bell peppers. I used to walk past those bright bell peppers at Walmart, thinking they were just there to make the produce aisle look pretty, all lined up in red, yellow, and green like God's little traffic lights. One morning, I decided to grab a few, not really sure what I'd do with them, but something about their color made me feel like I needed a bit more brightness in my day. I remember bringing them home, setting them on the counter while the early Texas sun came to the window, and I just stood there looking at them, thinking about how life can feel dull if we let it. Sometimes, the Lord nudges us to try something small, even if it's just a vegetable we never thought we'd bother with at 68. I sliced one open, and the smell was sweet, not like the bitter greens I used to dread as a kid, and I thought, maybe this is a small blessing I shouldn't ignore. It reminded me of the summers when we'd visit Grandma's farm, and she'd toss fresh peppers into her cast iron skillet, saying it gave the eggs a kick to get through the morning chores. I ain't got chores like that anymore, but I still need that morning kick to get moving without feeling wobbly. The first time I tossed those peppers into my eggs, the sizzle and sweet smell felt like a promise that maybe mornings didn't have to feel so heavy anymore. I noticed that when I had those peppers with breakfast, I didn't get that gnawing hunger an hour later that usually sent me rummaging for a muffin or cookie that would send my sugar all over the place. It's like those peppers helped me feel satisfied without making me feel sluggish, and I could go about my day without that sleepy crash that used to hit by mid-morning. I ain't saying they're magic, but it's something I noticed, and I'm grateful for it. It felt good to have a bit of crunch and sweetness without the guilt, and I found myself looking forward to breakfast again instead of seeing it as just another battle with my numbers. I remember sitting on the porch with my coffee after, feeling steady, watching the birds come to the feeder, thanking God for small victories that show up in quiet moments like that. Funny thing is, my grandkids started stealing slices off my plate whenever they came over, crunching on like they were candy, their little giggles filling up the kitchen while the smell of butter and peppers warmed the air. It made me realize how food can bring folks together without fuss, without having to cook up some big, complicated dish. It reminded me of when my own kid were little and how they'd peek over the counter to see what was cooking, hoping it was something sweet, and I'd sneak them a taste just to see them smile. Those peppers became part of those moments. Small pieces of color in our mornings that felt like a quiet blessing. I'd never thought a simple vegetable could add so much light to a room, but there it was, reminding me that even at 68, you can find new joys in small things. It's moments like that, with the family close and the kitchen warm, that I find myself whispering, "Thank you, Lord, for letting me be here to see it." The nice thing about bell peppers is you don't have to do much to them to enjoy them. I usually just slice them up, toss them into eggs, or a quick stir fry with a bit of onion, and maybe a sprinkle of cheese if I'm feeling fancy. And that's breakfast sorted. They don't take long to cook, and they stay good in the fridge for a while. So I don't feel rushed to use them up. Sometimes, if I want a quick snack, I'll just eat them raw with a bit of salt, and that crunch is enough to keep me from reaching for something sweet that I know will mess with my sugar later. It's a simple way to add something colorful to the plate, something that feels like you're doing right by your body without having to overthink it. At this age, I'm looking for easy, and bell peppers fit right into that, helping me stay on track without feeling like I'm missing out on flavor. If you've been feeling like your mornings are a battle, or you're tired of eating the same bland things just to keep your sugar steady, maybe it's time to add a bit of color back into your day. These peppers might seem small, but they become a part of my routine that I look forward to, a little promise that I'm taking care of myself without overcomplicating things. Give these peppers a try and see how they feel in your mornings. It's never too late to find a bit of joy in something simple, to discover that God's blessings can come in the shape of a bright red pepper sizzling in your skillet. Take it slow, take it steady, and thank the Lord for these small mercies that keep us going one quiet morning at a time. Number 6, cauliflower. One thing I noticed after I started adding cauliflower to my meals was how it kept me full without that heavy feeling in my stomach that bread and potatoes usually leave behind. It's like it sits light on you, but still does a job of keeping your hunger at bay. And for someone keeping an eye on sugar, that's a blessing. On mornings when I swap out toast for a bit of cauliflower mash next to my eggs, I can go about my chores without feeling that sleepy slump that used to sneak up on me before lunch. I like to think of it as a quiet helper on my plate, doing its job without fuss or fanfare, and letting me get on with my day feeling steady. Sometimes it's those small choices that add up, like drops of water that fill a bucket over time, giving us the strength to keep moving forward without feeling like we're battling our own bodies. It still amazes me how versatile cauliflower can be if you let it. I remember reading somewhere that folks used to call it the poor man's vegetable because it was cheap and filled you up, and I reckon there's some wisdom in that. Back in the day, families would stretch a meal with cauliflower in soups or stews, making sure everyone had something warm in their bellies, even when times were tight. These days, I find myself grateful for how easy it is to turn it into something comforting without making it complicated. There's a certain gratitude that comes with eating something simple and knowing it's helping you take care of yourself in a quiet way, especially when you've lived long enough to appreciate the value of small, faithful routines. When I cook it up, I like to steam it until it's soft, then mash it with a bit of butter, salt, and sometimes a sprinkle of pepper if I'm feeling bold. And it's a good stand-in for mashed potatoes without sending my sugar into a spin. Other days, I'll roast in the oven with a drizzle of olive oil until the edges get a little brown and crispy, filling the kitchen with a smell that makes you hungry in the best way. You don't need fancy gadgets or complicated recipes. You just need that head of cauliflower, a bit of heat, and a moment of patience. It's the kind of cooking that feels honest, like you're caring for yourself without rushing, letting the steam rise in the kitchen while you watch the birds outside the window, thanking God for these quiet mornings. If you've been feeling like you're stuck eating the same bland meals just to keep your sugar steady, maybe it's time to give cauliflower a chance to show you how satisfying it can be. It won't fix everything, but it might help you feel like you're not giving up taste while taking care of yourself. It's never too late to find a bit of hope in the small things, even if it's just a humble head of cauliflower waiting for you in your kitchen, ready to help you take one more faithful step toward feeling stronger each day. Number 5, broccoli. I remember when I used to look at broccoli like it was a punishment on the dinner plate, all green and stubborn, sitting there while I tried to think of excuses not to eat it. Funny how the Lord can change your heart about things you once disliked, especially when you're looking for ways to stay steady at 68 without depending on insulin. One morning, I decided to toss some broccoli into my eggs, watching the steam rise and that bright green color come alive in the skillet. And it felt like a small promise that maybe, just maybe, I could take better care of this body God gave me. The smell was warm, earthy, almost like the way the grass smells after a light rain, and I found myself grateful for this little piece of color in my quiet kitchen. It reminded me of when I was a kid and my mama would serve with dinner, telling us it would keep us strong, and back then, I'd roll my eyes, not knowing I'd be the one thanking her wisdom many years later. One thing I noticed after adding broccoli to my meals was how it seemed to help me feel satisfied without that heavy, bloated feeling I used to get from bread or big plates of rice. It's like it fills you up in a gentle way, letting you feel light and steady, which is something I appreciate on mornings when I want to get out for a walk without feeling weighed down. I ain't saying it's a miracle, but when I check my sugar after having broccoli with my eggs, I noticed it stayed steady like a calm river, and that gave me a bit of hope. It felt good to have something green on my plate that wasn't just lettuce, something with a bit of crunch and heartiness, reminding me that small changes can add up over time. It's not about perfection. It's about finding ways to care for yourself in small, faithful steps, even if it starts with a handful of broccoli in your breakfast. I read once that broccoli has something in it called sulforaphane, which folks say might help with how your body uses sugar, but I don't get into the weeds about it. I just know it's done me good. It's funny how these old vegetables have been around forever, and we're just now starting to appreciate how they can help us feel better without costing a fortune. I think about my grandparents, how they used to grow broccoli in their garden, and how they would steam it up with a bit of salt and butter, feeding the family without fuss or fancy recipes. There's a comfort in knowing you're eating the same simple foods that kept generations going before you, a reminder that God often provides in the simplest ways if we're willing to see it. When I cook broccoli, I like to steam it until it's bright green and tender, but still has a bit of crunch, then toss it with a touch of butter or olive oil and a sprinkle of salt. Sometimes, if I'm feeling like I want a bit more flavor, I'll add a dash of garlic powder, and it turns into something that feels like a warm, comforting dish without taking much time at all. Other days, I'll chop it up small and add it to scrambled eggs, letting it cook just enough to keep its color, adding a bit of freshness to the plate. It's easy, it's quick, and it doesn't leave me feeling sluggish, which is a blessing at this age when I need to keep moving and keep my mind clear. I find that cooking it myself, smelling it in the kitchen, watching the steam rise, feels like a small act of care for myself each morning. If you've been trying to find ways to add something steady to your meals without feeling like you're missing out on taste, maybe give broccoli a chance. It's not going to fix everything, but it might help you feel like you're doing something good for yourself each day without spending a lot of money or time. Let broccoli be part of your mornings or lunches, letting it bring a bit of green into your day, a bit of hope that you're taking steps in the right direction. It's never too late to add a bit of color and care into your meals, letting the Lord's small blessings show up even in something as humble as a piece of broccoli on your plate. Number 4, cabbage. Since I was a kid, I loved cabbage, especially on those chilly nights when my mama would cook it down with a bit of smoked meat, filling the whole house with that warm, peppery smell that made you feel safe. There was something comforting about hearing the bubbling pot in the kitchen while we finished chores before dinner, knowing a simple, hearty meal was waiting. Even now at 68, that memory comes back when I slice into a fresh head of cabbage, the crisp layers falling away, reminding me of simpler times when we didn't have much, but we sure felt blessed. My granddad used to say, cabbage will keep a man going when nothing else will, and I reckon he was right. There's a kind of quiet promise in the way cabbage softens as it cooks, turning into something tender and sweet without losing its backbone, like the folks who raised us. I like to think that each layer holds a bit of that old wisdom, carrying it forward to our table today. These days, I find that cabbage is one of those foods that settles well with me, giving me a good, satisfied feeling after a meal without making me feel heavy or sleepy. When I add cabbage to my dinners, I notice I don't get that restless hunger later in the evening that used to push me toward a sweet snack. It keeps me steady, helps me feel light on my feet, and lets me move around the house without that sluggish feeling that sometimes comes with heavier meals. On evenings when I want to keep things easy, I'll slice cabbage thin and toss it into a skillet with a bit of butter and a sprinkle of salt, letting it cook until it's just soft enough, catching that bit of sweetness that only comes out when it's warm. There's something about the sound of it sizzling that feels like a small comfort, a reminder that taking care of yourself doesn't have to be complicated or expensive. Cabbage has always felt like a family food, something you could stretch to feed everyone around the table, no matter how many mouths showed up at supper time. My uncle used to grow rows of it out back, proud of how those green heads would hold strong against wind and cold, ready to harvest even when the days got shorter and the air turned sharp. He'd send us home with a few, and Mama would tuck them into stews or shred them into salads, making every bit count. It's a humble vegetable, but it has a quiet strength, holding its place through generations, reminding us that God often provides through the simplest things. I think about that when I'm cooking cabbage now, grateful for the chance to carry on those traditions, even in small ways in my own kitchen. One of my favorite ways to use cabbage is to add it to soups, letting it soak up the flavors of broth and spices, making each spoonful feel like it's giving something back to you. Other times, I'll cook it down with a bit of onion and smoked sausage, letting the flavors dance together until the cabbage turns soft, with just a bit of bite left in the middle. It's the kind of meal that doesn't need a fancy recipe, just a bit of attention and patience, letting the cabbage do what it's always done best, fill you up and keep you warm. It's good on days when you want something hearty, without worrying about your sugar going all over the place, letting you enjoy a meal that feels full without being too much. There's comfort in the routine of chopping, stirring, and tasting, letting the smell fill your kitchen and your heart. Some evenings, after a warm bowl of cabbage and sausage, I sit by the window and watch the day slip into dusk, letting the quiet settle in. There's a comfort in knowing you've taken care of yourself in a small way, using the same simple foods that have fed families for generations. The smell of cooked cabbage lingers gently in the air, reminding me of family tables and hands that work hard to put meals together without fuss. It's a small thing, but it brings peace to an ordinary day, letting you breathe a little easier as the evening comes on. Funny how something as humble as cabbage can hold so many stories, so many quiet blessings, layer upon layer, waiting to be shared. Number 3, kale. They say some foods feel like they were made to keep you strong, and for me, kale has always felt like one of them. I remember walking to the farmer's market with my granddad on crisp fall mornings, him nodding at the bunches of curly green kale, saying, "That's good eating right there. Keeps you going." We'd bring it home in brown paper bags, and the leaves would still be cool with morning dew, smelling fresh like the promise of a good day. Mama would chop it up and toss it in a pot with garlic and a bit of broth, letting it simmer down while the house filled with that deep, earthy scent that made you feel cared for before you even sat down to eat. Even as a kid, I didn't mind kale, maybe because it felt like a part of family days, tied to the warmth of the kitchen and the hum of voices around the table. Some foods remind you of who you are and where you come from, and for me, kale has always done that. These days, I find that a bowl of cooked kale sits well with me, giving me a steady feeling after a meal instead of that heavy slump that can come with too much bread or rice. It doesn't weigh me down when I want to get up and move around, and it keeps me from looking for snacks later, which is a blessing at 68 when I'm trying to keep things steady, without making life too complicated. I've noticed that when I add kale to my plate, my sugar numbers seem to behave, letting me go about my day without that nagging worry in the back of my mind. It's a quiet sort of help, the kind that comes without noise or fuss, just doing its work while I enjoy the taste and warmth it brings to the table. Sometimes it's not about finding something new, but about return to what's always worked, and kale feels like that for me. I've read that kale's been around for a long time, showing up on family tables across generations, used in soups and stews by folks who knew how to stretch what they had without losing the goodness of a meal. There's a quiet strength in foods like that, foods that don't demand attention, but give you what you need if you let them. I think about the hands that pick those leaves, the farmers who rise before dawn to harvest them, and I feel grateful for the simple system God has placed in this world to feed us through his earth. It's easy to overlook the value of something as humble as kale when the world is full of noise about fancy diets and expensive powders. But sometimes the old ways are the best ways, reminding us that we don't need to overcomplicate what it means to take care of ourselves. I like to keep things simple when I cook kale, letting it speak for itself in the pot. I'll rinse the leaves, tearing them into smaller pieces, and toss them into a skillet with a bit of garlic, salt, and a splash of broth, letting them cook down until they're soft but still have that deep green color that makes you feel like you're eating something alive and good for you. Sometimes I'll add a dash of vinegar at the end, the sharpness waking up the greens just enough to keep the flavors bright without overpowering them. It's the kind of meal that comes together in minutes, filling the kitchen with a warm scent that feels like a quiet comfort on days when you need it most. I find it helps me slow down, letting me stand by the stove, breathing in the steam while the world outside moves fast. Some nights, after a bowl of warm kale, I'll sit with a cup of tea, letting the quiet of the evening wrap around me like a soft blanket. There's something about finishing a simple meal that leaves you feeling cared for, reminding you that the small choices matter, even when no one else sees them. The taste of garlic and greens still on my tongue, I look out the window at the darkening sky, the world settling into stillness, and I thank the Lord for the gentle ways He provides. It's a simple thing, but it's enough, and sometimes that's the best kind of blessing we can hold on to as we move forward, one quiet day at a time. Number 2, spinach. There's something about spinach that always made me feel like I was doing right by myself, even back when I didn't think much about health. I remember my mama adding a handful of fresh spinach to scrambled eggs before church on Sundays, the green leaves wilting just enough to keep their color, while the smell of butter filled the kitchen. It was never a fancy thing, just something she did out of habit, and we kids would eat it without thinking, wiping our plates clean before we ran outside to play in the Texas sun. Funny how those small habits stick with you, showing up years later when you find yourself reaching for that same handful of greens, looking for something steady and simple to start the day. Even now, when I toss spinach into a pan, that soft hiss and the way it turns bright before softening takes me back to those warm mornings, reminding me that taking care of yourself can be as simple as adding something green to your plate. What I like about spinach is how it never feels heavy, even when you eat a good serving of it. It fills you up in a gentle way, leaving you satisfied without that sleepy feeling that sometimes follows a bigger meal, letting you go about your day with a bit more lightness in your step. At 68, that matters more than it used to, wanting to move around the house or get outside without that slump pulling me back into the chair. I've noticed that when I have spinach with my meals, I don't get those sugar swings that can leave you feeling drained halfway through the morning. It's like spinach helps keep things steady, quietly doing its part while you enjoy the warm, simple taste that it brings to your plate. There's a comfort in having something that works without fuss, letting you live your day without the extra worry. Spinach has been around for generations, and there's a reason it keeps showing up in kitchens, from small family farms to big Sunday dinners. Folks who didn't have much would still find a way to add a bit of spinach to soups or stews, knowing it would stretch the meal while adding something nourishing to the pot. It's a humble kind of food, the kind that doesn't need a spotlight to prove its worth, reminding us that God often provides what we need in the simplest of ways. I think about those who came before us, working hard in fields and kitchens, and how they trusted these small, steady foods to keep their families going. It's a quiet reminder that sometimes the best things we can do for ourselves aren't loud or flashy, but consistent and faithful. When I cook spinach, I like to keep it easy, letting the greens wilt just enough to stay vibrant while soaking up the flavors of garlic or onion in the pan. Sometimes I'll crack an egg over the top, letting it cook together for a warm, comforting breakfast that doesn't take more than a few minutes to prepare. Other days, I'll add a handful of spinach to a pot of soup right before serving, letting the heat soften it without losing its color, adding that bit of freshness that brightens up each spoonful. You don't need a complicated recipe to make spinach work for you. It's the kind of food that fits into your day without asking for much, quietly adding a bit of goodness to your meals while you focus on the rest of your life. I find there's a kind of peace in that, letting small choices add up without overthinking. After a day that feels long, sometimes I'll have a small bowl of warm spinach with a bit of butter, sitting by the window as the light fades, letting the quiet of the evening settle in around me. The taste of the greens, the warmth of the bowl in my hands, and the soft hush of the house at dusk remind me that caring for yourself doesn't have to be complicated. There's a kind of gentle gratitude that comes with these small moments, thanking the Lord for the quiet blessings that show up in a simple meal, reminding us that it's enough. Spinach isn't a grand gesture, but it's a faithful one, and sometimes that's exactly what we need to keep going, steady and hopeful, one small meal at a time. Number 1, okra. Okra's been a friend to many families long before folks started talking about superfoods and diets on the TV. I remember summer mornings in Louisiana, watching my aunt pick okra from the tall, scratchy plants in her garden while the sun was just warming up the dew. She'd come into the kitchen with a small basket of those green pods, her hands smelling like the earth, and she'd start slicing them while humming an odom under her breath. There was something peaceful about the way she moved around the kitchen, dropping the okra into a pot with tomatoes and onions, letting it cook down slow while the smell filled the house with that soft, grassy scent. Even as a kid, I loved the taste of okra, how it brought a gentle thickness to stews, making every bite feel like a small comfort that stuck with you through the day. These days, I find myself reaching for okra when I want a meal that feels warm and steady, something that fills me up without leaving me feeling heavy or worn out. I've noticed that on the days I add okra to my meals, my sugar seems to behave, letting me get through the day without that sleepy drag that can come from heavier meals. There's a smoothness to okra when it's cooked that feels comforting, like it's settling into your stomach and telling you it's got your back for the day. I like that it's not a loud food, but a steady one, quietly helping you along while you enjoy the simple, earthy taste that reminds you of family kitchens and warm days spent with people you love. At 68, it's these small, steady helps that matter most. Okra's been a staple in kitchens across the South for generations, used in gumbos and stews, shared across tables where folks came together to eat and talk about their day. There's a kind of heritage in okra, a quiet reminder of the hands that work the soil, the prayers whispered over gardens for rain and sun, the gratitude spoken over steaming bowls at dinner. It's a humble vegetable that holds stories, carrying the care of those who prepared it, and the faith of those who trusted in God's provision to see them through another season. Every time I slice into okra, I think about those who came before me, how they made do with what they had, and how they found joy in the simplest meals shared with family and neighbors. When I cook okra, I like to keep it simple, letting it shine without too much fuss. Sometimes I'll slice it and toss it in a skillet with a bit of onion, letting it cook until it's just soft, still holding its shape, the kitchen filling with that warm, comforting smell that brings me back to my aunt's kitchen. Other times, I'll add it to a pot of beans or a light stew, letting the okra thicken the broth just enough to make it feel hearty, without weighing it down. It's the kind of cooking that feels honest, using what you have and making something good out of it, something that will fill you up and keep you steady without needing a recipe book or fancy gadgets. It's simple, real food, the kind that brings a bit of peace to your day. Last week, I had a bowl of okra stew for lunch, sitting out on the porch while the breeze moved through the trees, and I found myself grateful for the quiet moment. It's a small thing, a bowl of warm food, but it reminds you that taking care of yourself doesn't have to be loud or complicated. Okra has a way of making you feel like you're doing something kind for yourself, like you're honoring those who taught you how to care for your health in simple, faithful ways. As I sat there, the warmth of the bowl in my hands, I whispered a thank you to the Lord for the blessing of another day, for the small gifts that show up in the shape of a green pod and a quiet afternoon, reminding me that we can keep moving forward, steady and hopeful, one simple meal at a time. There's something about taking the time to prepare these simple foods that reminds me of the value in slowing down, even when the world around us feels like it's always in a rush. Standing in the kitchen, rinsing a bunch of kale, slicing bright peppers, or watching okra simmer in a quiet pot, you feel connected to something older and steadier than all the noise outside. It's in these small moments, the soft sizzle of the skillet or the smell of greens in the air, that we remember we're still here, still able to care for ourselves in ways that matter. I think about how many meals have been cooked in kitchens like ours, prayers whispered over them, and laughter shared between bites. These meals aren't about chasing perfection. They're about choosing something gentle and good, something that brings life back to the table. I've lived long enough to know that it's not the grand gestures that keep you going, but the small, faithful steps you take each day, like choosing a bowl of warm cabbage over something that leaves you feeling heavy, or adding a bit of spinach to your eggs instead of skipping breakfast altogether. These choices add up, not just in the way they help your body, but in how they lift your spirit, reminding you that you're worth caring for, even on the days when it feels hard. There's a quiet dignity in caring for yourself, in tending to your health in a way that doesn't feel like a punishment, but like a promise you make to yourself and to those who love you. It's not about chasing youth, but about honoring the life you have, one meal, one day at a time. I think often about the folks who came before us, how they made the most out of what they had, finding ways to turn humble vegetables into meals that nourish bodies and souls alike. They didn't have apps to track every step or programs telling them what to eat. They had common sense, gratitude, and a trust in the Lord's provision. I believe there's wisdom in looking back at those ways, bringing them forward into our lives now, letting them guide us in how we care for ourselves. It's a reminder that health doesn't have to be complicated, and you don't need expensive powders or gadgets to feel steady and strong. Sometimes, all it takes is a bit of cabbage in your soup or a handful of spinach on your plate to remind you of what truly matters. If there's one thing these simple foods have taught me, it's that taking care of yourself is a form of gratitude, a way of saying thank you for the days you've been given and the ones still ahead. It's in the way you wash the vegetables, cook them slowly, and sit down to eat without rushing, letting the warmth of the food remind you that you're still here, still capable, still blessed. It's not about doing everything perfectly, but about doing the best you can with what you have, trusting that each small step adds up, even if it doesn't feel like in the moment. Some days you might feel tired or discouraged, but even then, choosing a small act of care, like cooking yourself a warm meal, can be an act of hope. Before you go making big changes in your meals, make sure you check in with your doctor, all right? But if you get the clear, I hope you let these simple vegetables be a part of your days, reminding you that it's never too late to care for yourself, to choose something that makes you feel a bit stronger and steadier. Thank the Lord for these small mercies, for the chance to wake up each day and keep moving forward one quiet, faithful choice at a time. Take care of yourselves, friends, and God bless y'all.